My story is I'm the one that raised my hand that in high school knew exactly what I wanted to do in life. I hear that's rare because every time I say it to someone, if it comes up in a conversation, they all go, exactly like you did. Well, good for you. It's like that negative, it's more that like, I hate you, but I'm going to say it in a way that sounds positive, like, good for you. Proud of you. I did. When I grew up in a very conservative church world. Anyone else grow up like traditional Christian, very traditional? So you understand the idea of God's calling then, if you did, or at least the terminology. I grew up in that world. At about 15 years old, 16 years old, I knew, quote unquote, God's calling for me was to be in ministry, to be a pastor of some kind. I had no idea what that looked like, and I could not give you an actual God spoke to me and said this. I just kind of knew. But my struggle was, growing up in that environment, there was always the terminology, always the talk of understanding God's will, hearing God's voice. And I would hear friends or other mentors of mine that would talk about, God spoke to me last night and told me X, Y, Z. Now, I would go along with it and I would say certain things, but in reality, in the inside, I was always felt like a fraud because never in my life had I actually, what I thought they were talking about, had a moment of God spoke to me. I always lived through things like, all right, God, here's what I'm going to do. If you want me to do this, then I'm going to pull a Gideon on you, if you know that reference. I'm going to put these pile of clothes on the edge of the dresser here. If I wake up in the morning and they're on the floor, I'm gonna go this direction. If they're still there, I'm gonna go the other direction. Some variation of things like that, of making these deals with God, kind of this weird outspoken, like nothing's there, but God, if you do this thing, then I'll know to go this way. And it never happened, and I always stressed about it because I had no firm thing to say, this is what God told me to do. The hardest part of it, at 19 years old when I was in college, went to Bible college. Bible college, if you've never gone to Bible college, is full of people lying about what God told them to do. Probably a situation we have in churches nowadays because of that. Anyway, so it's kind of that realm of like, well, God told me to do this, and they throw down the God card, and you can't argue with it because I don't know what God told you to do. He probably didn't tell you to, stalk that person that you think you're supposed to marry, that didn't tell them that you were supposed to marry them, only told you. That's weird, but whatever. I can't argue because you used God as your argument. So much of that. So I spent 4 years in Bible college of people going, yeah, I know God's called me to do this, and I'm gonna go to the mission field. I'm gonna do all these things. And for me, going, well, I know God wants me to be in ministry, but I don't know what that looks like. But that wasn't a good enough answer. It was always, well, what does God want you to do in ministry? I don't know. When I get there, he'll probably tell me. Was never the right answer. I was 19 years old, 20 years old, maybe a little older than that. 1999 was my fourth year in college. Kind of approaching near the end of that, trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I was interning at a church in my hometown in Panama City, the church that I grew up in. And one of the guys at that church was going to be leaving to move to Tampa to start a new church. And he never said it to me. He never told me. He never asked me until I approached him. But I kind of knew inside that's what this person was going to do, that I'm close to. And I think I should go with him, but I don't know if I should. So I go to him. I bring it up. He says, yes, I've been waiting, kind of making some plans. I was going to ask you if you wanted to move with me and start this church. And I should have known right then, that was God going, here you go, buddy. This is the direction I want you to go. But I stressed about it because it never had that, God, I haven't heard you tell me yet. So one day, I'm in the shower. Did my best work in the shower, by the way. That's where I came up with all my ideas. And I was in the shower one day and I was stressing about it, and I was like, I don't know, should I do that? I could stay here and still work here. I have this opportunity, and I'm going through all the options of things that I could do, and I didn't know what to do. And I just like, God, I need you to tell me which way to go. Like, give me something that says this way, that way, and it never happened. And I finally just was frustrated enough that I went, all right, God, here's what's gonna happen. I'm just gonna go move to Tampa, and if that's the wrong direction, I guess maybe just screw it up. I don't know, do something. But if you don't tell me different, that's the way I'm gonna go. And that's what I did. And I immediately had peace about it. Years later, looking back on it, knowing that's exactly the direction God wanted me to go. And it didn't go the way that I thought it would, because 5 years later, I got fired by one of my best friends. And I remember laying in bed the next morning thinking, I have no reason to get up, because the one thing that I put everything into just got taken away from me. But again, in that moment, I knew, no, you needed this lesson so that you could do the next thing that I want you to do. And I realized how many times that I treated God's will, God's voice, whatever we want to call it, as a treasure hunt. X marks the spot. God, where do you want me to go? How do I get there so I can say, I did it, I'm in God's will? And I realized in that moment, that's not what it's about. Hearing God's voice, understanding God's will, getting to the place that, quote unquote, God wants you to be, is not so much about where you're going, but about who you're becoming. And whether it's working at Starbucks or working as a writer or working for a church, God's concern is, my will for you is to be the version of the person that I want you to be. Be that person in the world that I have created, loving, forgiving, gracious, mirroring me. And I began from that point on living my life in a way of going, I'm not sitting around waiting for quote unquote God's voice to hear it, to tell me what to do. I'm just going to make the next right choice for me. And whatever that is, God will use me in the way that He wants me to be used. So for me, hearing God's voice is less about hearing something and about making the next right choice for me and allowing God to continue walking with me in that direction and moving me along the way. So that's my story, and that's how I ended up here.